The most dangerous lies aren't the ones shouted in anger, but the ones whispered onto the leather seats of a private jet. Julian Ashford believed he was flying to paradise with his mistress. He thought his wife, Ilara, was at home, naive, pregnant, and completely unaware. He was wrong about everything. He didn't just book a flight, he booked his own destruction. Because while he was her husband, she was his owner, in every way that mattered. And the descent was going to be brutal. This is the story of how a man tried to cheat at 40,000 feet, only to discover his wife owned the sky. Julian Ashford checked his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse. The view stretched over Central Park, a glittering carpet of lights that he considered his birthright. He adjusted the cuffs of his Tom Ford shirt, a smug smile playing on his lips. At 42, he was the picture of success, handsome, ruthless, and the executive vice president of Ashford Hale Global, a private equity firm that, in his mind, he had built from the ground up. In the softer light of the living room, his wife, Ilara, sat curled on a sofa. She was 7 months pregnant, a slight woman made rounder by the life she carried. She was reading, not a fashion magazine, but a dense logistics report filled with fuel indices and flight crew duty rosters. "Still tinkering with that little airline hobby, darling?" Julian said, his voice dripping with condescension. He walked over and kissed the top of her head. "It's sweet." Ilara looked up, her grey eyes clear and analytical. "It's not a hobby, Julian. Ascend Charter Services turned a 17% profit last quarter." Yes, I'm sure it did," he placated, patting her shoulder. "As long as it keeps you busy. Now, I have to finish packing." "Chicago again?" Ilara asked, her gaze returning to the report. "Afraid so. This deal in the Midwest is crucial. Just a quick overnight, in and out. The board is demanding an in-person presentation." He straightened his tie. "Don't wait up for me. You're packing a linen suit for Chicago. In October?" Julian paused, his back to her. "The hotel has an indoor pool, Ilara. I thought I might get a swim. Relax." He forced a laugh. "You should know. I'm taking the corporate jet. The team needs me fresh." "The corporate jet?" Ilara asked, her voice quiet. "Ashford Hale doesn't have a corporate jet, Julian. We have a NetJet fractional ownership." "Semantics," he waved dismissively. "I'm chartering. It's all on the corporate account. Don't worry your pretty, pregnant head about it." Ilara watched him walk into their master bedroom. The little airline hobby she was tinkering with was Ascend Charter Services, ACS, a premier private aviation company her father had built from a single Learjet into a fleet of 40 state-of-the-art aircraft. Since his passing, Ilara had taken over, not as a figurehead, but as the active, brilliant CEO. Julian, whom she had met when he was a hungry, ambitious analyst, managed one of the many subsidiaries of the Hale family's massive holding company. He seemed to forget that his entire firm, Ashford Hale Global, was, in fact, entirely owned by her. His paycheck, his corporate card, his penthouse, all of it flowed from her trust, from the Hale empire. She had let him believe in his own importance. It seemed to make him happy. His ego was a fragile, demanding thing, and it was simply easier to manage it than to fight it. While he played king in his boardroom, she quietly ran an empire. Later that night, as she lay in bed alone, his phone, left on the nightstand, buzzed. It was plugged in, the screen lighting up. Ilara glanced over. A text from C. Vance. "Cannot wait for tomorrow. Italy. You are my king. I've already packed the red dress. You won't be able to resist." Ilara's breath hitched. Italy. Not Chicago. C. Vance. Chloe Vance. a junior analyst at Julian's firm. A stunning, hungry-looking woman Ilara had met at the company Christmas party. A woman whose eyes had lingered on Julian far too long. The blood drained from Ilara's face, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. The lie wasn't just about another woman. The lie was about everything. He was using her own money, the funds from the company she owned, to fly his mistress to Italy. He was packing linen. She picked up her own phone, her fingers moving with precision. She opened the secure portal for Ascend charter services. She didn't need to guess which airline he'd booked. Arrogant men were creatures of habit. He would book her airline, believing it was just some anonymous charter service, because he knew ACS had the best, the Gulfstream G650s, the Bombardier Globals. He would want to show off. She logged into the executive manifest for the Teterboro, TEB, FBO. And there it was, Flight 722, N900 ACS, a Gulfstream G650UR, departure 10 Mats AM, destination Linate, Lynn, Milan, Italy, passenger manifest 2, primary PAX, Mr. Julian Ashford. Guest PAX, Ms. Chloe Vance, billing, Ashford Hale Global Corporate Account. Ilara looked at the special requests. 1 bottle of Armand de Brignac, Ace of Spades champagne, chilled. Petrosian caviar with blinis, a cold lobster platter. He was throwing a party in her sky. A cold, sharp fury, cleaner and more powerful than any sadness, settled over her. He didn't just underestimate her as a wife. He underestimated her as a businesswoman. He was staging his affair inside her own multi-million-dollar asset. She closed her eyes, her hand moving to rest on her pregnant belly. "He has no idea," she whispered. He had no idea who he was dealing with. She picked up the phone and dialed the number for her head of operations, a man who had worked for her father for 20 years. "David," she said, her voice perfectly level. "It's Ilara Hale. I need to make a sensitive, last-minute alteration to the flight plan for N900 ACS tomorrow morning. No, the client will not be aware of it until he's airborne. And get me Captain Miller. I want him on this flight. He'll know what to do." Chloe Vance zipped up her 4th suitcase. It was a bright, obnoxious pink, emblazoned with a designer logo that screamed, "New money." She looked around her tiny studio apartment, a cramped box in a nondescript part of Jersey City, and sneered. "Goodbye, you dump," she said to the empty room. Her phone buzzed. It was Julian, at the FBO. "Car is sending for you now. Don't be late." Chloe laughed. "Don't be late." As if. She had been ready for this moment her entire life. She was 25 years old, and she had spent the last 3 years in the analyst pool at Ashford Hale, fetching coffee and running spreadsheets, all while watching the partners. She didn't want to be them. She wanted to marry them. Julian Ashford was her golden ticket. He was handsome, powerful, and, best of all, married to a mousy, boring heiress who, in Chloe's opinion, didn't deserve him. Chloe had seen Ilara Hale at that Christmas party, quiet, dressed down, and visibly pregnant. Pathetic, Chloe had thought. Letting herself go. Chloe had made her move 6 months ago. A late night working at the office, a feigned crisis over a merger document, a shared bottle of whiskey in his office. Julian had fallen for it, hook, line, and sinker. He was so desperate to be seen as the powerful, desirable man he pretended to be, that he was easy prey for a woman who reflected that image back at him. Now, this trip. Italy. "Just a business trip," he'd told her, a wink in his eye. "You can be my very special assistant." She'd squealed. She'd spent 2 months' salary on a new wardrobe. This was it. This was the moment she would seal the deal, convince him to leave his pregnant, boring wife and make her the new Mrs. Ashford. A black Escalade, commissioned by Julian through the charter service, idled outside her building. The driver loaded her 4 bags. She slid onto the plush leather seats, feeling like a star. When she arrived at the private FBO at Teterboro, Julian was waiting inside the sleek, quiet terminal. He looked every bit the master of the universe, sipping an espresso, his eyes scanning the tarmac. "There you are," he said, kissing her full on the lips. He didn't care who saw. This was his world. "The plane, Julian," Chloe breathed, looking out the window. Is that it?" Parked just outside, gleaming white under the morning sun, was a Gulfstream G050ER. It was long, sleek, and impossibly elegant. "That's our ride," Julian said, grabbing her hand. "Ascend Charter Services. They're the best. Only the best for you, baby." "Ascend," Chloe murmured. "Isn't that—" "Just a name," Julian cut her off. "They're one of the biggest operators on the East Coast. Now come on, they're ready for us." A uniformed pilot and a flight attendant were waiting at the bottom of the stairs. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Ashford, Ms. Vance." The flight attendant, a polished woman in her 40s named Sarah, smiled. "I'm Sarah, and I'll be taking care of you on our flight to Milan today." "Milan?" Chloe giggled, squeezing Julian's arm. "I love the sound of that." They stepped inside. The cabin was a masterpiece of cream leather, polished dark wood, and brushed platinum. It smelled like wealth. There were 2 distinct living areas, a full galley and a private stateroom in the back. "Oh, Julian," Chloe whispered, her eyes wide. She ran her hand over the supple leather of the club chair. This is how life is supposed to be." "Get used to it," Julian said, settling into a seat and accepting a pre-departure glass of water from Sarah. He declined the champagne. "Not until we're in the air. We toast to our future." As the jet door was sealed, Chloe felt a definitive click. She was leaving her old life behind. She looked at Julian, who was busy texting on his phone, probably sending some last-minute lie to his wife. Poor Elara, Chloe thought, feeling a sudden, sharp spike of pity that was really just contempt. Stuck at home, getting fat, while her husband takes me to Italy. The 2 massive Rolls-Royce engines spooled up with a deep, powerful hum. The jet taxied, smooth as silk, and in moments they were accelerating down the runway, a surge of power pinning them to their seats. They lifted off, climbing steeply over the New York skyline, banking east over the Atlantic. The fasten seatbelt sign dinged off. "And now," Julian said, his eyes glittering. Sarah appeared, as if on cue, with the silver ice bucket and the green-gold bottle of Armand de Brignac. The cork popped with a satisfying thwump. She poured 2 crystal flutes. Julian raised his. "To us, Chloe," he said, "to new beginnings, and to a long, long weekend in Lake Como." "To us," she chirped. They clinked glasses. The champagne was crisp, expensive, and tasted like victory. Chloe settled back, sipping her drink, and watched the curve of the earth appear as they climbed to 41,000 feet. She was, quite literally, on top of the world. While Chloe and Julian were toasting over the Atlantic, Elara Hale was in the ACS Operations Center, a high-tech nerve center adjacent to the main Teterboro hangar. The room was dark, lit only by the glow of 24 monitors displaying weather patterns, flight paths, and aircraft telemetry. It was the beating heart of her company. David Chen, her head of operations, stood beside her, a tablet in his hand. David was a quiet, precise man who had started as a baggage handler for Elara's father. His loyalty was absolute. 900 ACS is wheels up as of 10:04 a.m., David reported. They've passed 10,000 feet and are on their cleared transatlantic route. Estimated arrival in Milan. Well, that's irrelevant now. "Good," Elara said. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. She was wearing simple black trousers and a cashmere sweater, her pregnancy a gentle curve under the fabric. She looked less like a grieving wife and more like a general commanding a war room. "Captain Miller is at the controls," David continued. "First Officer Reynolds is with him. Both are senior pilots. Flight Attendant Sarah is the best we have. She's aware there's a sensitive situation with the client, but knows no details, only to follow the captain's lead." "And the new flight plan?" "Filed and cloaked. As far as any air traffic controller is concerned, it's a standard filing. The diversion will be logged as a client-requested route change once they're in oceanic airspace. Completely standard procedure, Mrs. Hale. No flags." "Elara," she corrected him, as she always did. "Please, David, call me Elara." "Elara," he nodded, a flicker of deep respect in his eyes. "The crew at BGR is standing by." "BGR," Elara said, testing the name. "Bangor, Maine. It was one of ACS's key technical stops and refueling hubs for transatlantic flights. It was also remote, quiet, and home to a massive private ACS maintenance hangar that she owned outright. It was the perfect place." "And the other matter?" she asked. David tapped his tablet. "Our legal team, led by Arthur Bennett, is en route to BGR on your G700. They will arrive approximately 2 hours before N900 ACS. The local sheriff's department has been notified that we will have a private security detail meeting a flight. We've filed a trespass warning for 2 individuals, names to be provided upon arrival, just in case they become uncooperative." "They will be," Elara said. "Julian doesn't like to lose." She had spent the last 12 hours meticulously dismantling his life. While he was sleeping peacefully, dreaming of Italy, she had been on a 4-way conference call with her legal, financial, and security teams. First, she'd had Arthur Bennett, her family's notoriously brutal lawyer, draw up the divorce papers. The petition was ironclad, citing adultery, and included a motion to immediately freeze all shared assets pending review. Second, she convened an emergency virtual board meeting of the Hale Holding Company. As majority shareholder and chairwoman, it was a formality. She presented the evidence: Julian Ashford's corporate card statements, which were a sea of illicit dinners at Daniel and Le Bernardin, jewelry receipts from Cartier, and now the charter of a $65 million jet for his mistress. The board voted unanimously. Julian Ashford was terminated, effective immediately, for gross misconduct and embezzlement of company funds. Third, she had her security team change the locks and access codes to the penthouse. His belongings were, at that very moment, being boxed up and sent to a storage unit in Queens. She was methodical. She was precise. She was her father's daughter. The betrayal had hurt. Waking up to that text message felt like a physical blow, a theft of air from her lungs. The fact that he could do this while she was carrying his child, it was a special kind of cruelty. But the grief had lasted only an hour. It was quickly replaced by a cold, crystalline rage. He hadn't just betrayed her as a wife, he had insulted her as an owner. He had used her own power against her, assuming she had none. He thought she was a hobbyist. He thought she was sweet. Julian had made the cardinal sin of all arrogant men. He had confused kindness for weakness. "David," Elara said, turning away from the glowing map of the North Atlantic, "I'll be flying to Bangor myself. Have my jet ready in 30 minutes. "You're going to be there?" David asked, surprised. "Elara, are you sure? With your condition?" "My condition makes me clearer, David, not weaker," she said. "I'm pregnant, not incapacitated. He started this using my company. I will end it inside my company. I want to see his face when he realizes he didn't just book a flight. He booked his own judgment day." Elara walked out of the operations center and across the tarmac to her personal jet, a sleek Bombardier Global 7500. As she boarded, She looked east into the high, clear sky where N900 ACS was speeding toward a destination it would never reach. "Enjoy the champagne, Julian," she whispered to the wind. "It's the last thing you'll ever get from me." 3 hours into the flight, 900 ACS was a silver speck over the vast, empty blue of the North Atlantic. The point of no return had been passed. They were in oceanic airspace, handed off from one anonymous controller to another via high-frequency radio. Inside the cabin, the party was in full swing. The first bottle of Armand de Brignac was empty. The caviar had been devoured. Julian had his tie undone, his feet up. Chloe, giddy and slightly drunk, was taking selfies, carefully angling the camera to show the ACS logo on the bulkhead and the champagne flute in her hand. "Julian, this is life," she slurred happily, snuggling against him. "We should do this every month. Maybe we can go to Dubai next, or St. Bart's? Whatever you want, baby," Julian murmured. He was feeling expansive, powerful. The G650 was an incredible machine. He felt like a true master of the universe. He'd even sent a text to Ilara. "Long day. Chicago is freezing. Board meeting was a success. Love you." He'd winced at the "love you," but it was necessary. Keep her docile, keep her at home, nesting. He looked at Chloe, at her youth, her flawless skin, her overt adoration. This was what he deserved. Not a quiet, intellectual wife who was more interested in engine maintenance reports than in him. In the galley, Sarah, the flight attendant, was cleaning the crystal flutes. Her earpiece chirped. It was a secure text-based message from the cockpit, routed through the plane's satellite communications. Cabin, F.A. Sarah. Secure from FLT-DK. We will be initiating a diversion in 10 minutes. ACAR's message from OPS. Client requested diversion to BGR. Repeat, BGR. Sarah's professional mask didn't slip, but her eyebrows rose. BGR. Bangor. The client had been so insistent on Milan. This was strange. A client-requested diversion that the client clearly hadn't requested. She knew what this meant. This was an owner-level directive. She'd been with ACIS for 15 years. She'd seen Ilara Hale grow up. She'd adored Ilara's father. She looked back into the cabin at Julian and Chloe, who were now laughing loudly, their feet on the priceless wood veneer tables. A flicker of disdain crossed her face before she smoothed it away. Galley. FLT-DK. Acknowledged. Cabin secure. In the cockpit, Captain Miller, a silver-haired veteran, looked at his first officer. "Right," Miller said. "Message received. OPS confirms. We're turning to heading 310. Contact Gander. We're diverting to BGR." "Reason?" the first officer asked. "Owner's prerogative," Miller said gruffly. He wasn't paid to ask questions, but he'd seen the passenger manifest. He knew who Julian Ashford was, and he knew who Ilara Hale was. He could put two and two together. "Let's make it sound good." Captain Miller switched on the intercom. His voice, calm and authoritative, filled the cabin. "Folks, this is Captain Miller up front. Apologies for the interruption. We've just received a word from our operations center. Unfortunately, it appears there's an unexpected and significant ground crew strike unfolding at Linate Airport in Milan. All private aviation handling has been suspended indefinitely." In the cabin, Julian and Chloe sat up straight. "What?" Julian said aloud. "Suspended? What the hell does that mean?" "Due to this unforeseen closure," the captain's voice continued, "we are not permitted to land in Milan. We are working on an alternative, but for now, we must divert. We'll be turning toward Bangor, Maine, which is our primary Atlantic hub. We will land there, refuel, and our ground team will try to arrange a new flight plan. I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience. Sarah will be through to secure the cabin. We expect to be on the ground in Bangor in about 90 minutes. The intercom clicked off. Bangor? Chloe shrieked. Maine! What is in Maine? I didn't pack for Maine. Calm down, Julian snapped, his good mood vanishing. This is ridiculous. A strike? Get me the captain. He hit the call button angrily. Sarah appeared. Mr. Ashford? This is unacceptable, Julian fumed. I'm a priority client. Get the captain on the sat phone. I want to talk to operations. I have a connecting car in Milan. This is a multi-million-dollar business trip. I'm very sorry, sir, Sarah said, her voice a mask of professional regret. The captain is currently handling the diversion with air traffic control and cannot be disturbed. As for operations, I'm afraid there's nothing they can do about a labor strike. Our hands are tied. The entire Milan airspace is affected. It was a brilliant lie, specific, plausible, and completely non-negotiable. This is... Julian was sputtering, his face red. He was losing control and he hated it. Can we go to Paris? Rome? Chloe pleaded. I'm afraid Bangor is the closest and most logical port of entry, madam, Sarah said. We have to clear customs, and our full-service BGR facility is the fastest place to do that. I'll need you to return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. We'll be starting our descent shortly. Chloe slumped back into her chair, her arms crossed, her bottom lip trembling. This is ruined. Everything is ruined. Julian stared out the window. The plane was in a long, gentle bank to the left. The sun was now on the wrong side. He was no longer flying toward paradise. He was flying back toward the continent he'd just left, to a cold, forgotten airport in Maine. It's fine, he said, trying to regain his composure. It's a delay. Just a delay. We'll get to the ground, I'll yell at someone, and they'll get us a new plane to Italy. This is just a logistical hiccup. But a small, cold worm of unease began to twist in his gut. A strike. It was just too convenient and too absolute. He looked at Sarah, the flight attendant, who was calmly collecting their empty glasses, her face a perfect, polite blank. He was losing his power, and it terrified him. 90 minutes later, the wheels of the G650 touched down with a gentle puff of smoke on the runway at Bangor International Airport. The 90-minute flight to Bangor was excruciatingly silent. The party atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by a thick, sullen tension. Chloe pouted, scrolling through her phone, which had no service, while Julian stewed, his mind racing. A strike. It had to be a strike. What other explanation could there be? He'd read about those snap strikes in Europe. It was just his rotten luck. His entire, perfectly planned romantic getaway, derailed by a bunch of union baggage handlers. He rehearsed the speech he would give to the ground crew. He would demand a new flight immediately. He would threaten to take his business elsewhere. He would remind them just how important he was. The Ashford Hale account was worth millions in charter hours. They wouldn't want to lose that. He'd probably get this flight for free, as compensation. Yes, that was it. He'd turn this around. Just you wait, Chloe, he said, as the plane began its final approach. I'm going to have us on a new jet to Rome within the hour. I'll make them pay for this. Chloe just grunted. The plane landed smoothly. Julian looked out the window, expecting to see the bright, welcoming lights of a private terminal, an FBO like the one at Teterboro. Instead, the G650 taxied and taxied. They passed the main terminal. They passed the private hangars. They kept going, down a dark service road toward a remote part of the airfield. Where are we going? Chloe asked, her voice nervous. This isn't the terminal. It's probably a customs area, Julian said, though his own unease was growing. The jet made a final slow turn and rolled to a stop. It didn't stop on an open ramp. It rolled inside a building, a massive, cavernous, and sterilely lit maintenance hangar. With a final whine, the engines began to spool down. The sudden, heavy silence was deafening. Outside the window, there was no red carpet, no waiting car, just the polished grey concrete floor of a hangar lit by harsh, unforgiving fluorescent lights. "What is this?" Julian demanded, standing up. "Sarah, what is going on? This is a maintenance hangar." "The captain has asked that you deplane here, Mr. Ashford," Sarah said. Her voice was different. The polite warmth was gone, replaced by a cold, flat efficiency. "Please take all your personal belongings with you." "I'm not going anywhere until I speak to the operations manager," Julian snapped. "He's not available, but the owner's representative is waiting for you." "The owner's?" Julian stopped. Oh, finally. Good. About time someone with authority showed up. He straightened his shirt, preparing for battle. He'd have this sorted in 5 minutes. The main cabin door unsealed with a hydraulic hiss. The stairs slowly, silently unfolded, touching the concrete floor. A blast of cold, damp air filled the cabin. "Come on, Chloe," Julian said, grabbing his briefcase. "Let's go sort this mess out." Chloe, looking pale and confused, grabbed her designer purse. They walked to the door and stood at the top of the stairs. The hangar was vast, big enough to hold 3 G650s. Their jet was parked in the center, and standing about 50 feet away, directly in front of them, were several figures. Julian's eyes focused. He squinted. The figures were standing beside a different jet, a sleek bombardier. And the central figure. Julian's blood turned to ice. His stomach dropped, as if the jet had fallen 10,000 feet. It was Alara. She was not in Manhattan. She was not nesting. She was here, in a hangar in Maine, standing with her hands clasped in front of her. She was flanked by 2 very large men in dark suits, and a third man, older, with a face like a hawk, holding a leather satchel. Julian recognized him instantly. It was Arthur Bennett, the family lawyer. The shark. "Alara?" Julian whispered. The name came out as a dry croak. Chloe, standing behind him, saw her too. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Oh my God, Julian, that's your wife." Julian's mind fractured. It tried, desperately, to assemble the pieces. Alara. Here. The lawyer. The hangar. The strike. There was no strike. The realization hit him not as a thought, but as a physical force, a punch to the gut that left him breathless. "Alara!" he called out, forcing a smile, his voice echoing unnaturally in the huge space. He started down the steps, pulling his confused, loving husband mask into place. "Darling, what on earth are you doing here? Our flight. There was a strike in Milan. It was diverted. What a crazy coincidence." Alara didn't move. She just watched him approach, her grey eyes as cold and flat as the concrete floor. "There was no coincidence, Julian," she said. Her voice was clear, cutting through the silence. "And there was no strike." Julian stopped, about 10 feet from her. Chloe hovered behind him, a pale ghost. What are you talking about?" Julian stammered. "The captain said—" "The captain," Alara interrupted, "is Captain Miller. He's been with my family for 20 years. He follows my orders, Julian, not yours. I diverted the flight. Welcome to Bangor. I believe it's lovely this time of year, though you won't be staying long." Julian's world tilted. He looked from Alara's cold face to the massive, gleaming Gulf Stream he had just left. He looked at the ACS logo on the hangar wall. Ascend Charter Services. Your family?" he said, his mind slow. This is just some airline we use." Alara let out a small, dry laugh. It was a terrifying sound. You poor, arrogant fool. You've been married to me for 5 years. You've been running a company that my company owns. And you never once, not once, paid enough attention to know what I actually do. She took a step forward. My father, Robert Hale, founded Ascend Charter Services. This hangar, this jet, the pilots, the flight attendant you've been ordering around, they are all mine. You didn't charter a flight, Julian. You borrowed my plane for your affair. The blood drained from Julian's face. He was white as a sheet. Elara, listen, this isn't... I can explain. Explain what? She asked. Explain her? She flicked her eyes toward Chloe, a look of such profound dismissal that Chloe visibly flinched. Explain Ms. C. Vance on the manifest. Explain the Armand de Brignac and the lobster. Explain the hotel reservation at the Villa d'Est on my corporate card, the one you thought I didn't see. Julian, Chloe whimpered. You told me she didn't know anything about the business. You told me she was just a housewife. Shut up, Chloe, Julian hissed, panic rising in his throat. He turned back to Elara, his hands raised. Elara, baby, listen to me. This is a mistake, a terrible, stupid mistake. That woman means nothing to me. I was stressed. The pressure of the job. You've been so distant. Distant, Elara said, her voice rising for the first time, sharp as glass. I've been pregnant, Julian. I've been growing your child while you were buying lingerie for a 25-year-old analyst. Please, Elara, he begged. He was desperate now. We can fix this. I'll fire her. I'll do anything. Don't do this. Think of the baby. I am, Elara said. I'm thinking of the world I want to bring my child into, and it's not one that has you in it. She nodded to the lawyer. Arthur Bennett stepped forward, his face impassive. Mr. Ashford, Arthur said, his voice a dry rustle. He opened his satchel and produced a thick file. You are hereby served with a petition for divorce, citing adultery. Your assets, those which are not protected by the Hale Family Trust, which is to say, almost nothing, are frozen, pending this action. Julian just stared at the papers. Furthermore, Arthur continued, pulling out a second, thinner file. This is a letter of termination from the board of Ashford Hale Global, effective immediately, for gross misconduct and felony embezzlement of company funds. Your access codes, your corporate accounts, and your key to the penthouse have all been deactivated. You are to have no further contact with any employee of the Hale Holding Company. Embezzlement, Julian choked. I built that firm. You can't fire me. You didn't build it, Julian. You were an employee, Elara said simply. A very, very overpaid employee, and you stole from me. This little trip alone is over $100,000 in jet time, catering, and crew. Julian's entire life, the penthouse, the cars, the reputation, the power, it was all vanishing, right here, under the fluorescent lights of a hangar in Maine. He looked at Elara, at her calm, powerful stance. The mousy, sweet wife was gone. In her place was a CEO, a queen, an executioner. He had never really seen her, not until this moment. So that's it, he whispered, his voice broken. You stranded me in Maine? No, Elara said. I'm not stranding you. This is my private hangar. You are trespassing. She nodded to the two large security men, who took a step forward. They will escort you and Ms. Vance to the main terminal. She looked at him one last time, her eyes sweeping over the man she thought she knew. I believe there's a 6 a.m. commuter flight to Boston. It's coach. I trust you have your personal wallet, as your corporate cards are, of course, no longer functional. I hope you saved Julian. She turned without another word and walked toward her bombardier jet, its stairs already deployed. Arthur Bennett followed her. "Elara!" Julian shouted, a last desperate cry. "Elara, please, don't leave me here. I love you." Elara paused at the top of her jet stairs. She looked back, her face illuminated by the warm light from her cabin. "No, Julian," she said, her voice clear across the distance. "You didn't love me. You loved what I gave you, and you just lost it." She disappeared inside, the door sealed. The heavy thud of the bombardier's door sealing echoed in the cavernous hangar. It was a sound of absolute finality. A full, terrible silence descended, broken only by the quiet hum of the hangar's ventilation system. Julian Ashford stood frozen, the legal papers clutched in his numb hand. The termination letter was on top. The words, "gross misconduct," seemed to pulse under the harsh light. "Well," said one of the security men, stepping forward. He was built like a refrigerator and had a completely impassive face. "You heard the lady. Time to go." I... Julian couldn't form a sentence. His brain had stalled. Chloe finally broke. The shock and silence shattered, and she let out a wailing sob. "You lied to me!" she shrieked, turning on Julian. She hit his chest with her fists. "You told me you were the boss. You told me she was nothing. You ruined my life. Get off me!" Julian snarled, pushing her away. Chloe stumbled, her high-end heels scraping on the concrete. She was a mess, mascara running in black rivers down her pale face. "My bags!" Chloe suddenly remembered, looking wildly back at the G650. "My 4 suitcases! My new clothes! I need my bags!" "The baggage is being transferred, ma'am," the second security guard said, not unkindly. "It'll be at the main terminal for you to check. Assuming," he added, "you can pay the baggage fees." The humiliation of it was a physical acid. The thought of his carefully packed Tom Ford suits and Chloe's designer dresses being hauled into the main terminal, of them having to stand in line at the coach check-in. It was unthinkable. "I am not flying coach," Julian said, his voice low and trembling with rage. "I am Julian Ashford." "You were Julian Ashford," the first guard said, his patience clearly gone. "Right now, you're just a guy trespassing in Mrs. Hale's hangar. Let's go. Now." He put a large hand on Julian's shoulder. Julian flinched, but the grip was like iron. He had no choice. The 2 security men walked them, one in front, one behind, toward a small metal service door in the corner of the hangar. As they walked, the engines on Elara's bombardier jet spooled up, the deep, powerful hum filling the space. Julian didn't look back. He couldn't. The guards pushed them through the service door, out into the pre-dawn chill of the Maine morning. It was dark, cold, and smelled of jet fuel and pine. A simple black sedan was waiting. "This will take you to the main terminal," the guard said. "Don't come back to this side of the airfield. You won't be welcome." He shut the door. Julian and Chloe sat in the back of the car, separated by a chasm of mutual hatred and failure. They didn't speak. The car drove them around the perimeter of the airport. As they neared the terminal, Elara's bombardier screamed overhead, climbing fast and steep into the dark sky, its navigation lights blinking, heading south, heading home. They were dropped at the curb for departures. It was 4:30 a.m. The terminal was mostly empty, save for a few sleepy travelers and a janitor. Julian walked, like a zombie, to the ticket counter. I need 2 tickets on the 6 a.m. flight to Boston," he said to the agent. "That'll be $480, the agent said, chewing gum. Julian pulled out his wallet. His hand trembled as he pulled out his personal visa. He had been so used to the black corporate Amex, the card that never declined. He handed it to the agent. The agent swiped it. and swiped it again. "Sorry, sir," she said, her voice bored. "It's declined." "What?" Julian's voice cracked. "That's impossible. Try it again." She tried it again. "Declined." "Do you have another card?" Elara. She hadn't just frozen the shared assets. She must have had him removed from their personal accounts too. The prenup. He'd barely read it. He'd been so in love, so sure he could charm her. He'd signed whatever Arthur Bennett had put in front of him. He was broke. "Julian?" Chloe's voice was sharp. "Julian, pay for the tickets." I can't," he whispered. "What do you mean you can't?" she shrieked, drawing the attention of the janitor. It's declined." Chloe stared at him, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated loathing. "You are useless," she spat. She opened her own purse, pulled out her emergency credit card, and slammed it on the counter. "One ticket. Just mine." "Chloe, wait!" Julian grabbed her arm. "You can't leave me here." "Watch me," she snarled, snatching her ticket from the agent. "You're nothing. You're a fraud. And you're broke." She turned and marched toward the security checkpoint, her single carry-on rolling behind her, not once looking back. Julian Ashford stood alone in the Bangor International Airport terminal. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a weak grey light through the windows. He had $200 in cash in his wallet, a phone that was now just a useless piece of glass, and a set of divorce papers. He had flown to 40,000 feet, thinking he was a king, only to be brought crashing down to earth by the woman he thought was a fool. He had lost his wife, his job, his mistress, and his future, all before breakfast. The owner had welcomed him. And then, she had taken everything. The automatic doors of the Bangor terminal slid shut behind him, muffling the sound of Chloe's retreating footsteps and the bored chatter of the ticket agent. Julian Ashford stood on the curb in the weak 4:45 a.m. light. The air was frigid, cutting through his expensive unlined linen suit, the suit he'd packed for Italy, for Lake Como. He shivered, a deep, convulsive shudder that came not just from the cold, but from the bone-deep shock. He was nothing. He had $212 in cash and a phone that was now, he discovered, completely dead. The HailNet corporate plan he was on had been severed. He had no data, no contacts, no ability to call a car. He was as isolated as if he'd been dropped on a desert island. He looked around. The terminal was a small, lonely outpost. A sign pointed to ground transportation. He walked, his briefcase, once a symbol of his power, now just a heavy, useless box, banging against his leg. "Bus?" he asked the dispatcher at the taxi stand, the word feeling alien and disgusting on his tongue. "Is there a bus? To New York?" The dispatcher, a large woman in a fleece vest, looked him up and down, taking in the expensive suit and the desperate eyes. "Greyhound station's downtown, 5 miles. Bus to Boston, leaves at 7:30 a.m. You can connect to New York from there. Cab'll run you $20. Julian handed over a $20 bill from his dwindling cash. The cab ride was silent, the driver humming along to a country music station as they drove through the dark, unfamiliar streets of Bangor. Julian just stared, his mind a white-hot static. The bus station was worse. It smelled of stale coffee, disinfectant, and desperation. He paid $88 in cash for a one-way ticket. He sat in a hard plastic chair, waiting for 2 hours, surrounded by people he'd spent his entire life actively ignoring. He, Julian Ashford, who flew Gulfstreams, was waiting for a Greyhound. While Julian was breathing in the fumes of the bus terminal, Elara Hale was at 45,000 feet, heading south. The cabin of her Global 7500 was quiet, the lighting set to a soft, dawn-like glow. She had slept for an hour, a deep, restful sleep. Now she was sipping a chamomile tea and reviewing quarterly maintenance projections on her tablet. Arthur Bennett sat across from her, his own tablet glowing. "The termination is clean," he said quietly. The for-cause clause in his employment contract, which I wrote, is ironclad. He has no stock options that weren't vested through the holding company, and his entire 401k was based on company matching, which we can and will claw back due to the felony embezzlement. "Good," Elara said. "I want him left with nothing he didn't earn before he met me, which, as I recall, was a 2014 model BMW and $70,000 as in student debt." "Precisely," Arthur said, a thin smile touching his lips. "As for the penthouse, the doormen at 740 Park have been given his photo and a standing no trespass order. They are very, very loyal to your family, Elara. He won't get within 100 feet of the lobby." "And Ms. Vance?" "Terminated, same as Ashford. Her access was cut before she landed in Boston. She's just a girl with a lot of new clothes and a maxed-out credit card. She's irrelevant." Elara nodded, satisfied. She closed her report and looked out the window at the curved, blue line of the earth. She felt a kick, low and firm in her belly. She placed a hand there. "It's done," she whispered. "We're safe." This wasn't a celebration, it was a cleansing. She hadn't just removed a cheating husband. She had excised a cancer. The bus was a special kind of hell. It was slow. It stopped in 6 forgotten towns in Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. Julian was crammed into a seat next to a man who smelled of sour whiskey. He hadn't eaten. He was exhausted, humiliated, and filthy. The linen suit was hopelessly wrinkled, stained with something from the terminal seat. By the time the bus pulled into Boston South Station, it was early afternoon. He had another 2-hour wait. He bought a stale pretzel and a bottle of water. $11. He was down to $130. Meanwhile, Chloe Vance was in the baggage claim at Logan Airport, screaming at a skycap. Her 4 pink suitcases were sitting in the oversize area, and the airline was demanding a $300 fee for the extra weight, a fee Julian was supposed to have paid. "My card won't work," she yelled, her voice hoarse from crying. "Just give me my bags." "Can't, miss. Not till it's paid." She tried her work email. Access denied. She tried her corporate Amex. Declined. She tried her personal card again. It, too, was declined. She was completely, totally ruined. She had no job, no money, and no way to even get her clothes. She sank onto a baggage carousel, her sobs echoing in the cavernous room, just another piece of unclaimed luggage. It was nearly 9:15 p.m. when Julian's bus finally descended into the diesel-choked bowels of the Port Authority bus terminal in Manhattan. He stumbled out, his body aching, his head pounding. He was back in his city, but it felt like a foreign country. He was on 42nd Street. His penthouse was on 74th and Park. He couldn't afford a cab. He didn't have the energy to figure out the subway. So he walked. He walked 32 blocks, his briefcase getting heavier with every step. The city he used to own, the city he looked down on from his glass-walled penthouse, now seemed to sneer at him from every direction. The doormen, the valets, the couples dining in beautiful lit-up restaurants. They were all part of a world he was no longer in. He finally reached his building. 740 Park. The limestone facade glowed with old money and impenetrable power. He walked toward the gleaming brass doors. Thomas, the night doorman, a man who had accepted $1,000 Christmas tips from Julian for 5 years, stepped out. He didn't open the door. He held his hands up, palms out. "Mr. Ashford," Thomas said, his voice polite but cold. "I'm sorry, sir. I cannot let you in." "Thomas, what are you talking about?" Julian panted, exhausted. "It's me. It's my home. Just let me in. "I have strict instructions from Mrs. Hale Ashford, sir," Thomas said, his eyes not meeting Julian's. "You are not a resident here. Your belongings have been removed. If you do not leave the premises, I will be forced to call the police." "The police?" Julian laughed, a dry, hysterical sound. "On me. Please, Mr. Ashford, don't make this difficult." The finality of it hit Julian. The doorman, the bus, the declined card, the hangar, Ilara. He backed away, shaking his head. He was a ghost, haunting his own life. He turned and walked away from the light of the canopy, a rumpled man in a ridiculous linen suit, carrying a briefcase full of useless papers. He walked until his feet were bleeding. He found a grimy, neon-lit motel in Long Island City, just across the river, a place that rented rooms by the hour. He paid $90 in cash. The room smelled of bleach and old cigarettes. The sheets were thin. He lay on the bed, still in his suit, and stared at the flickering fluorescent light in the ceiling. He could see the Manhattan skyline from his dirty window, a glittering, unattainable fortress. He was so close, and yet he had never been farther away. The fall was complete. It wasn't just 40,000 feet. It was a fall from grace, from power, from life itself. And he knew, in the buzzing, awful silence of that cheap motel room, that this was not the bottom. It was just the beginning of the long way down. Julian Ashford learned that day that there is no altitude high enough to escape the truth. He mistook his wife's kindness for weakness and her silence for ignorance. He forgot that the one who signs the checks is the one who sets the flight plan. Ilara Hale and her unborn child were already back in their penthouse, the locks changed, before Julian even found the bus station. He lost his wife, his job, and his pride in a single, icy morning in a Maine hangar. A brutal landing, but one he charted all by himself. What did you think of Julian's downfall? Was Ilara's revenge perfect, or would you have done something different? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. This story is a reminder that the biggest betrayals often come with the steepest consequences. If you loved this drama, don't forget to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see it, and please subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories every single week. Click that notification bell so you never miss an update. A man's arrogance is a dangerous thing. For Arthur Vance, it was a blinding narcotic. He stood on the balcony of the 20,000 a night Imperial Suite at Villa Kestrel, his arm wrapped around a woman who was not his wife. He'd brought his mistress to the most exclusive resort on Lake Como to celebrate the end of his marriage, assuming his quiet, timid wife was at home, weeping. He was about to humiliate her, to flaunt his new life in her face. But Arthur made one catastrophic mistake. He assumed he was the predator, when he was merely the fool walking into the trap. The Riva boat cut through the azure water of Lake Como, its mahogany deck gleaming like polished obsidian. Arthur Vance checked his watch, a Patek Philippe Nautilus, rose gold. It was a $300,000 statement that screamed, "I have arrived." Beside him, Sienna, squeezed into a canary yellow dress, angled her phone to capture her profile against the dramatic backdrop of the Alps. "Is it exclusive, baby?" she asked, her voice a breathy purr. "I don't want to see any families." "The Villa Kestrel, darling," Arthur replied, his voice booming with the self-satisfaction of a man who had just conquered the world. "It's not a hotel, it's a private estate. They only have 12 suites. The waiting list is 3 years long, unless you're me." He had, of course, leveraged a recent, spectacular quarter at his hedge fund, Vance Capital, to bully the concierge at his private bank into securing the reservation. This trip was a celebration. A victory lap. 2 days ago, he had instructed his lawyers to serve divorce papers to his wife, Amelia. Amelia. The name tasted like ash in his mouth. Dull, beige, predictable Amelia. She was the woman he'd married 15 years ago, a strategic merger of his new money ambition with her quiet, respectable family name. She was the ballast he'd needed then, but now she was just dead weight. She spent her days managing her family office, a quaint little inheritance he never bothered to look into, and engaging in quiet philanthropy. She was a ghost in his minimalist mansion, a woman who wore cashmere in neutral tones and never, ever raised her voice. Sienna was the opposite. She was loud, demanding, and spectacularly beautiful. She was a living, breathing trophy, a testament to his success. The boat slowed, approaching a stone dock shrouded in ancient wisteria. A man in an impeccably tailored linen suit was waiting. This was Alessandro Bianchi, the general manager. "Mr. Vance, welcome to Villa Kestrel," Bianchi said, his smile polite but lacking warmth. "We have the Imperial Suite," Arthur announced, not as a question, but as a declaration. "Of course, sir. If you would follow me." The grounds were magnificent, a tiered paradise of cypress trees and blooming azaleas. Arthur felt a surge of power. This was his world now. As they were led into the main villa, a converted 17th century palace, Arthur paused. "My bags," he snapped, gesturing back toward the dock. "They are already in your suite, sir," Bianchi replied smoothly. The Imperial Suite was larger than his first apartment. It was a sprawling expanse of marble, frescoes, and modern Italian furniture, with a private terrace that seemed to float over the lake. "This will do," Sienna said, flopping onto a chaise lounge and immediately starting a video for her followers. Arthur, meanwhile, cornered Bianchi. "I'll need a dinner reservation for tonight. 8 o'clock. The best table at your restaurant, Alba d'Oro. And I'll require a specific wine. A double magnum of the 97 Screaming Eagle." Bianchi's eyebrow twitched, the barest flicker of surprise. "Sir, our restaurant focuses on indigenous Italian varietals. I am almost certain we do not have that particular Napa Cabernet." "Then find it," Arthur said, dismissing him with a wave. "Have it flown in from Milan. I don't care about the cost. I am celebrating a significant personal victory." "As you wish, sir," Bianchi said, his voice clipped. "Will Signora Vance be joining you for this trip?" Arthur laughed, a short, barking sound. "You mean my wife? God, no. She's not exactly the Villa Kestrel type. She's at home, probably, cataloguing stamps or whatever it is she does. We're getting a divorce. This," he said, gesturing to Sienna, "is the future." Bianchi's expression remained unreadable. He simply nodded. "I see. Enjoy your stay, Mr. Vance." As the manager left, Arthur uncorked the complimentary bottle of champagne. He felt invincible. He had his youth, or a semblance of it, a stunning mistress, and a rapidly expanding fortune. He had finally cut the cord from his boring, passionless marriage. He raised his glass to Sienna. "To new beginnings," he toasted. "To us," she giggled, clinking her glass against his. From the lake below, the distant thrum of another boat engine approached, but Arthur, lost in his own reflection in the window, paid it no mind. The first 24 hours were a blur of decadent indulgence, precisely as Arthur had planned. He and Sienna were deliberately, extravagantly loud. They monopolized the main infinity pool, taking endless photos and ordering magnums of rosé before noon. Arthur took work calls by the pool, shouting aggressive instructions to his traders in New York about shorting a new tech stock. "We're going to bleed them dry, Robert," he yelled into his phone, enjoying the winces from an elderly couple reading nearby. Sienna, meanwhile, treated the staff with a casual disdain that mirrored Arthur's. She sent back a plate of prosciutto e melone because the melon was too orange. She complained that the thread count on the pool towels was acceptable, but not amazing. Arthur loved it. He loved her entitlement. It reflected his own. That evening, they prepared for their dinner at Ristorante Alba d'Oro. Arthur was fastening his Patek when his lawyer, Stephen, called from New York. Arthur, just confirming. The papers were served to Amelia's residence this morning. The process server noted she accepted them personally. And? Did she cry? Fall apart? Arthur asked, straightening his silk tie. The server just said she was polite. She signed for them and closed the door. Arthur scoffed. Polite, of course. She's probably already called her mother and retreated to the family home in Connecticut. Pathetic. Good. The quicker she accepts this, the quicker I can finalize the settlement. Give her the house. I don't care. I'll buy 3 more. About the settlement, Arthur. Stephen paused. Her lawyers haven't responded yet. But the prenup is ironclad. She gets the house and the stipulated alimony. Your main assets, the fund, are completely protected. Exactly, Arthur said. She was a nice distraction, but she can't compete in the big leagues. Now, if you'll excuse me, Stephen, I have a $10,000 bottle of wine waiting for me. He hung up and turned to Sienna, who was applying a final layer of lip gloss. It's done, he said. The anchor is officially cut. They descended the grand staircase to the restaurant. The maitre d' led them to the best table, set on a small private balcony overlooking the twinkling lights of Bellagio across the lake. It was obscenely romantic. See? Arthur whispered to Sienna. I own this place. The dinner began well. The food was undeniably brilliant, but Arthur was waiting for his wine. Finally, Mr. Bianchi approached their table, his hands empty. Mr. Vance. My sincere apologies. You found it, I trust? Arthur said, annoyed at the interruption. Sir, as I explained, we do not carry that bottle. I did, as requested, contact our suppliers in Milan and even Zurich. It is not possible to procure a double magnum of that vintage on such short notice. Arthur felt a flush of anger. Not possible? Do you understand who I am? Not possible isn't an acceptable answer. We do, however, Bianchi continued, his voice dangerously calm, have one of the finest cellars in Lombardy. I would be happy to recommend a Barolo or a Super Tuscan that would far exceed— I don't want a Barolo, Arthur snapped, his voice rising. Several diners turned to look. I wanted what I asked for. This is supposed to be a 5-star establishment, Sienna chimed in. He told you like hours ago. Are you incompetent? Bianchi's eyes hardened, but his voice remained level. I apologize that we could not meet your expectations, Signorina. I will leave you to your meal. He turned and walked away. The nerve, Arthur hissed. I'll have his job for this. I'll buy this entire hotel and fire him myself. You should, baby, Sienna agreed, already forgetting the wine and taking a selfie. But the interaction left a bitter taste in Arthur's mouth. It was the first time since his arrival that his power had been questioned. It was a tiny crack in the facade of his perfect weekend, and it infuriated him. He felt a prickle of unease, a sense that the deference he'd been shown earlier was not awe, but something else. A strained tolerance. He pushed the feeling down, ordering the most expensive other wine on the list and drinking it too quickly. He would not let some jumped-up hotel manager ruin his triumph. The next day, Arthur woke with a dull headache from the wine. He was determined to erase the previous night's slight. He would spend the day on the lake, projecting an image of such effortless wealth that the entire staff would be forced to grovel. He and Sienna emerged onto the sun-drenched breakfast terrace, dressed in matching white linen. Arthur was loudly detailing his plan to rent the hotel's vintage Reaver speedboat for the day when he suddenly froze. His coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. Across the terrace, seated at a quiet corner table shaded by a massive olive tree, was Amelia. It was impossible. He blinked, certain the high-proof wine and the bright sun were creating a mirage. But it was her. She was not crying. She was not dressed in black. She was wearing a simple, elegant, cream-colored silk shell top and white trousers. Loro Piana, he registered absently. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple chignon. She was reading a book and sipping an espresso. She looked peaceful. Sienna, oblivious, was still talking. And I want them to pack a huge basket, with caviar, and those little sandwiches and— "Shut up," Arthur hissed. "What?" Sienna looked offended. Arthur couldn't take his eyes off his wife. His wife, here in the same hotel. How dare she? His mind raced, cycling through emotions. First, shock, then a burning, white-hot rage. She was stalking him. She had received the divorce papers and, in a pathetic, desperate move, had followed him here to— what? Confront him? Make a scene? Beg him to come back? A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. The initial shock subsided, replaced by a profound sense of satisfaction. This was even better than he'd imagined. He thought she would crumble in private, in their empty mansion. But she had delivered herself to him. She had brought her humiliation to the most beautiful place on earth, right to his doorstep. "Baby, what is it?" Sienna asked, finally noticing his fixed stare. She followed his gaze. "Oh my God, is that her?" "The soon-to-be ex-Mrs. Vance?" Arthur sneered, his good mood restored. "What is she doing here?" Sienna whispered, horrified. "This is our trip. It's so tacky. She looks so plain." "She's desperate, darling. This is the last pathetic act of a dying animal," Arthur said, savoring the moment. "She thinks she can guilt me. She thinks she can ruin our celebration." He watched Amelia for a long moment. The most unsettling part was her calm. She didn't look like a woman on the verge of a breakdown. She looked serene. She turned a page in her book. She ordered a second espresso from a waiter, who addressed her with a familiarity that annoyed Arthur. "Well, I'm not having it," Sienna declared, standing up. "I'm going to go over there and tell her to leave." "No, no." Arthur pulled her back down, his mind formulating a much more delicious plan. "Don't interrupt her. Let her have her breakfast. We'll be on the boat all day. The real fun, the real confrontation, should be public. Let's wait until tonight, at the bar, right before dinner. We'll let everyone see her for what she is." "What is she?" Sienna asked, confused. "A ghost," Arthur said, his eyes glinting. "And it's time to exorcise her." But as he tried to enjoy his day, the image of her calm, composed face plagued him. He'd expected tears, hysterics, shouted accusations. He'd expected a fight. Her quiet presence was a dissonant note in his perfectly composed symphony of triumph. He found himself checking the terrace from the boat, wondering if she was still there. He became agitated, snapping at Sienna when she asked him to take a photo for the 10th time. "Just enjoy the view, will you?" he barked. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Her being there wasn't just desperate. It was illogical. Amelia hated attention. She hated confrontation. Why would she fly across the world to a place she knew he would be, only to sit quietly and read a book? He dismissed it as the bizarre, irrational behavior of a woman scorned. He was in control. He was the one with the power. And that evening, he was going to prove it. The air at sunset was thick with the scent of jasmine. The hotel's main terrace bar was filling up with the other guests, a German industrialist, a French actress, a Silicon Valley billionaire. It was a crowd of quiet, immense power. This was the stage Arthur had chosen. He and Sienna took a central sofa, ordering the most expensive champagne. He saw Amelia enter the terrace. She was alone. She had changed into a simple, navy blue silk dress. No jewelry, save for her plain gold wedding band, which she twisted thoughtfully, and a pair of simple pearl earrings. She took a small table by the balustrade, overlooking the lake. She ordered a glass of water with lemon. "She's not even drinking," Sienna whispered, disgusted. "It's like she's trying to be boring." "It's show time," Arthur said, standing up. He smoothed his custom-made blazer, took Sienna's hand, and began to walk toward his wife. He felt the eyes of the other guests follow him. They recognized him from the pool. They recognized her from breakfast. This was going to be delicious. He stopped directly in front of her table. She looked up, her expression mild, as if noticing a waiter, not the husband who had just filed for divorce. "Amelia," Arthur began, his voice dripping with false pity. "What a fascinating surprise." "Hello, Arthur," she said, her voice even. "Sienna." Sienna, feeling her cue, stepped forward. "I just don't understand what you're doing here, Amelia. It's really pathetic. Can't you take a hint? He's with me. This is our vacation." Arthur held up a hand, silencing Sienna with a gesture. Now, darling. Let's be gentle. She's clearly going through a difficult time." He looked back at Amelia, his smile becoming a sneer. "Really, Amelia? This is a new low, even for you. Following me here? Did you really think you could fly to Lake Como and I'd just... What? Forget everything and take you back?" Amelia took a slow sip of her water. "I'm not here for you, Arthur." "Oh, please." Arthur laughed, a harsh sound that made the German industrialist look over with annoyance. "Who else would you be here for? Did you come to scrub the floors? I didn't realize your little family fund was doing so poorly that you needed a part-time job." "You need to leave," Sienna insisted. "You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing him." "She's right," Arthur said, leaning in, his voice dropping to a confidential, cruel whisper. "It's over. I've moved on. I've upgraded. You need to accept it. Go home. Go back to your garden, or your charities, or whatever it is you do. You don't belong here. This world, it's not for you. It's for people who take what they want. You're just the person who gets left behind." He stood back, arms crossed, waiting for the tears, waiting for the breakdown. Amelia simply looked at him. She held his gaze for a full 10 seconds, her eyes clear and steady. There was no pain in them. There was no anger. He couldn't place it. It looked almost like pity. "Are you finished?" she asked. The question caught him off guard. "Am I... What?" "Your speech. It was very theatrical. Are you finished?" Before Arthur could reply, Mr. Bianchi, the general manager, appeared at his elbow. His face was a mask of cold professionalism. "Mr. Vance," Bianchi said, his voice quiet but carrying the unmistakable weight of authority. "Ah, Bianchi," Arthur said, turning triumphant. "Perfect timing. It seems we have a trespasser. This woman is not a guest. She is my estranged wife, and she is harassing me. Please have her removed from the property. Quietly, if possible. I'm feeling generous." Sienna smirked, pulling out her phone, no doubt to film the walk of shame. Bianchi did not look at Amelia. His eyes were locked on Arthur. "Mr. Vance, I am the one who must ask you to be quiet. You are causing a disturbance to our other guests." Arthur's smile vanished. "Excuse me. I am the guest. She is the trespasser. Remove her. Now." "I'm afraid you are mistaken, sir," Bianchi said. "Signora Vance is our guest. You are the one who is no longer welcome." The terrace went silent. The only sound was the gentle la-la-la-lap of the lake water against the stone walls below. Arthur felt a cold dread, a sudden sickening drop in his stomach, like a faulty elevator. What did you just say?" "He said you're not welcome, Arthur," Amelia said, finally setting her water glass down. She stood up. She was shorter than him, but suddenly she seemed to command the entire terrace. "This is ridiculous," Arthur sputtered, looking around for support. The other guests were pointedly looking away, pretending to be fascinated by their olives. "I have the Imperial Suite. I'm paying $20,000 a night. You can't. Bianchi, are you insane? Do you know who I am?" "I'm afraid I do, Mr. Vance," Bianchi said, "and I am acting on direct orders from my employer." "Then get your employer," Arthur roared. "He's standing right in front of him," Amelia said. The world seemed to tilt. Arthur stared at her. He looked at Bianchi. He looked back at her. The dots connected, but the picture they made was impossible. You're not?" "What?" Amelia asked. "A guest? You're right, I'm not. I haven't been a guest here for 6 weeks." She turned to the manager. "Alessandro, how are the new kitchen renovations at Albadoro coming along? I saw the invoices for the new Molteni stoves." "They are performing beautifully, Signora Vance," Bianchi replied, his voice now filled with the warmth that had been absent before. "The chefs are ecstatic. Your choice was, as always, perfect." "Signora Vance?" Arthur whispered. The name echoed in his ears. Bianchi had used it before, at the dock, but he'd assumed. "I bought it, Arthur," Amelia said, her voice flat as if discussing the weather. "The Villa Kestrel, and the 2 smaller properties in Tuscany, and the vineyard in Piedmont. My quaint little family office, as you called it, decided to expand its hospitality portfolio. This," she gestured to the stunning villa around them, "is one of its smaller, more recent acquisitions." Arthur's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. You're lying," he finally managed to say. "This is a joke, a sick, twisted joke." "Am I?" Amelia reached into her Bottega Veneta clutch and pulled out a single key card. It was a heavy, black metal card. "This is the master override. It opens every door in this hotel, including, I believe, the Imperial Suite." She turned to Bianchi. "Alessandro, Mr. Vance, and his guest will be checking out immediately." "Wait!" Sienna shrieked, finally finding her voice. Her face was pale with shock. "You can't do this. We have a reservation. We've paid." "On the contrary," Amelia said, turning her cool gaze on Sienna. "Your reservation, which was tied to Mr. Vance's corporate account, was cancelled this morning. As for payment," she looked at Arthur, "the credit card you have on file, the Amex Centurion card from the corporate account, it was declined about, 2 hours ago. A rather precipitous drop in your available credit, it seems." This was the part Arthur couldn't understand. "Declined? That's impossible. My fund is worth 9 figures. I have a limitless credit line." "Had, Arthur," Amelia corrected him. "You had a limitless credit line. You see, that's the other thing I've been busy with." "What other thing?" Arthur asked, but he was afraid of the answer. The air had become thin. He couldn't seem to draw a full breath. "While you were celebrating, I was with my legal team," Amelia explained, her tone conversational. "You were always so careless with the paperwork, Arthur. You found it so boring. You just signed whatever Stephen put in front of you." "The prenup," Arthur said, grasping at straws. "It's ironclad. My fund is protected." "Your fund, yes. Vance Capital is all yours," Amelia agreed. The problem, Arthur, is that Vance Capital is now worth nothing. Arthur's blood turned to ice. What are you talking about? You're a hedge fund manager, Arthur. You understand leverage. You understand collateral. She began to walk slowly toward him, and for the first time, he found himself taking a step back. The seed money you used to start your fund, 15 years ago, she continued. The angel investment you thought you'd charmed out of that old banker. That wasn't him. That was my father. It came from my family trust. But it wasn't a gift, Arthur. It was a loan collateralized not just by the fund's assets, but by every asset tied to the trust. That's not true. It is. And when you married me, you signed a waiver giving me, as the executor of my father's estate, full proxy control over that collateral in the event of gross personal misconduct. I believe adultery, particularly with an employee. Yes, I know Sienna was your marketing assistant. Counts. The papers I signed this morning weren't divorce papers, Arthur. They were default notices. Arthur's phone, which had been silent all day, suddenly buzzed. He pulled it out with a trembling hand. A text from his COO, Robert. Margin call. All lines. J.P. Morgan is pulling our credit. Arthur, what did you do? Another buzz. His private bank. Urgent. Immediate repayment demanded on all personal loans. Another. Vance Capital assets. Frozen pending investigation. While you were at the pool, Amelia said, I called the note. All of it. The stocks you were shorting? My fund took the long position, backed by a consortium I put together. Your little bleed them dry plan? You were betting against me, and you lost. She gestured to his wrist. That Patek, the house, the jet you flew here on, they weren't yours, Arthur. They were on loan, and the loan has been recalled. Arthur stumbled backward, hitting a stone pillar. He wasn't just divorced. He wasn't just embarrassed. He was ruined. He was nothing. The entire edifice of his life, his wealth, his power, had been a house of cards balanced on his wife's boring family trust. He looked at Sienna. Her face was a mask of horror and calculation. She was looking at Arthur, but not with sympathy. She was looking at him as if he were a contagious disease. Arthur, she whispered, her voice tight with panic. Is it true? Arthur couldn't speak. He just stared at his phone, watching his life evaporate in a series of text messages. Oh my God, Sienna said, backing away from him. Oh my, I need to use the restroom. She turned and fled, not toward the restrooms, but back toward the lobby. She didn't look back once. Arthur was left alone, surrounded by the quiet hum of the wealthy guests who were now openly staring. He looked at Amelia. The ghost. The beige, boring, predictable woman who had just dismantled his entire world before her water glass got warm. Why? He whispered, the only word he could find. You asked me if I came here to scrub the floors, Amelia said, her voice devoid of triumph. It was just final. I came here to sign the quarterly reports. You just happened to be here, too. She signaled to Bianchi. Two large, polite, and unyieldingly firm security men materialized from the shadows. Alessandro, Amelia said, turning her back on Arthur. Please show Mr. Vance the service exit. His things are being brought down. She walked away, not toward the restaurant, but toward a private study. A man Arthur hadn't noticed before, a distinguished man in a dark suit. Her lawyer, David, he now realized, stood up as she approached, holding a folio of documents for her to sign. Wait, Arthur cried out. Amelia, wait, we can talk about this. But she didn't turn around. She just disappeared inside, the door closing with a quiet, expensive click. The humiliation was a physical thing, a cold, heavy blanket that smothered the air from his lungs. The two security men, both named Giorgio, didn't lay a hand on him, but their presence was a cage. They moved with the calm, inexorable certainty of men who dealt with distasteful situations for a living, their professionalism a far deeper insult than any overt aggression could have been. Arthur, who had commanded boardrooms with a single glance, was now being herded like a stray animal. They guided him not through the grand, marble-floored lobby where he had made his triumphant entrance, but down a series of sterile service corridors. The walls were stark white, scuffed with black marks from delivery carts. The air, once scented with jasmine and expensive perfume, now smelled faintly of bleach and cooking oil. It was the resort's hidden anatomy, the guts he was never meant to see. Each step away from the opulent guest areas was a step down a ladder he hadn't known he was climbing, a descent into a world he thought he had long since escaped. The office they led him into was small and windowless, furnished with a single metal desk and a rolling chair with a tear in the vinyl. On the wall was a corkboard pinned with staff schedules and safety notices. This was the nadir. This was where his imperial reign ended. His luggage, the entire set of custom monogrammed Louis Vuitton hard cases that a personal shopper had assured him projected effortless global power, was piled unceremoniously by the door. It wasn't stacked with care. It was dumped, a monument to his fallen status. A junior staff member, a young man named Luca with nervous eyes and a carefully neutral expression, was waiting for him. He studiously avoided looking directly at Arthur, focusing instead on a tablet he held with both hands. "Mr. Vance," Luca began, his voice barely above a murmur. Arthur's instinct, the snarling, cornered reflex of a deposed king, was to lash out. "Don't you Mr. Vance me! Get Bianchi down here! Get me the owner! This is an outrage!" Luca flinched but held his ground. The Georgios, standing by the door, shifted their weight ever so slightly, a silent reminder of the new reality. Luca's refusal to engage, his adherence to protocol, was another wall Arthur couldn't breach. He was no longer a guest to be placated. He was a problem to be processed. "I need you to sign here, sir," Luca said, extending the tablet. "It's a receipt for your personal effects, acknowledging that you have taken possession of them from the property." Arthur stared at the screen. The list of his own belongings felt like an indictment. 1-1 Patek Philippe watch, rose gold. 1-1 pair of Loro Piana driving loafers. 3-3 bespoke Brioni suits. It was an inventory of his ruin. He snatched the stylus, his hand shaking with such violent tremors that his signature was a jagged, illegible scar across the screen. He shoved the tablet back at the boy. Luca took it, his eyes flicking down for a moment. He seemed to steel himself for the next part. "Sir, your associate, Miss Sienna. She left a message for you." A flicker of something pathetic and desperate ignited in Arthur's chest. Hope. Maybe she'd had a change of heart. Maybe she was waiting for him, had arranged a car. Maybe this was all a terrible misunderstanding. "What is it? Did she get a taxi? Where is she?" Luca swallowed, his gaze fixed on a point on the wall just over Arthur's shoulder. "She said, and these were her words, sir, 'Do not contact me. Ever.'" The words struck Arthur with the force of a physical blow. Ever. Not "I'm sorry," not "I'll call you," but a final, brutal severing. He saw her now with horrifying clarity, not as a partner, not even as a mistress, but as a parasite that had just detached itself from a dying host. He had seen her as a prize he had won. She had seen him as a position she had temporarily occupied. As if to twist the knife, Luca slid a small, sealed envelope across the desk. The paper was the same thick, creamy stock used for the restaurant menus. Arthur tore it open with fumbling fingers. Inside was not a note of apology or explanation. It was a bill. It was an itemized list of every incidental he and Sienna had consumed since their arrival. It was all there in crisp, unforgiving black ink. The 4 magnums of Taitinger Rosé by the pool, the emergency Dior sunglasses Sienna had insisted on from the hotel boutique, the couple's massage he hadn't even wanted, the ridiculously expensive plate of melon she had sent back. Every single charge was a small monument to his own foolishness. He scanned down to the bottom line, a number that would have been trivial to him just that morning. $22,480. Below it, stamped in a vicious, accusatory red, were 2 words: payment declined. My cards. There must be a mistake, he stammered, the lie tasting like acid in his mouth. He knew there was no mistake. He could feel the digital guillotine that Amelia had dropped, severing him from the global financial network. We are aware of the situation, sir, Luca said, his voice soft with what might have been pity. Signora Vance's instructions were to put it on your tab. This copy is for your records. For your records. A final mocking piece of paperwork for the man who was now a non-entity. He crumpled the bill in his fist, the thick paper resisting, a final echo of the quality he could no longer afford. One of the Giorgios opened the service door, revealing not the manicured, lamplit grounds of the estate, but a dark, gravel-strewn path that ran alongside the building, the opulent, jasmine-scented paradise he had inhabited just minutes ago was a world away. Here, the air was cool and smelled of damp earth and the faint, unpleasant odor from a nearby row of dumpsters. The public ferry dock is that way, the security guard said, his voice flat and final. He pointed into the oppressive darkness. It is a 20-minute walk. The words hung in the air, absurd and impossible. A walk? Arthur's voice cracked. You can't be serious. I need a car. Call me a taxi. A boat. I'll pay, he added, the words hollow even to his own ears. We are not a taxi service, sir, the guard replied without a flicker of emotion. He and his partner stepped back inside. The heavy service door closed, and the lock engaged with a definitive metallic thud that echoed in the sudden silence. It was the sound of his old life being sealed away forever. He was alone. Truly, utterly alone in the dark, surrounded by luggage that represented a fortune he no longer possessed. He looked down at his hands, then at the Brioni suit that suddenly felt like a cheap costume. He had to move the bags himself. The thought was paralyzing. He bent down, his back protesting, and grabbed the handle of the largest suitcase. It was incredibly heavy. He grunted, pulling it a few feet along the gravel path, the small wheels catching and scraping on the stones. He had to stop, breathing heavily, sweat beading on his forehead. He set off on the long, humiliating walk, dragging the suitcase behind him, its rattling wheels the only sound accompanying his ragged breaths. The path was uneven, and he stumbled twice, his thin-soled loafers offering no protection against the sharp stones. Each painful step was a fresh humiliation. From above, he could hear the faint, elegant sounds of the world he'd been ejected from, the sophisticated murmur of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the soft strains of a string quartet playing on the terrace. He imagined the other guests, the German industrialist, the French actress, glancing at his empty sofa, perhaps sharing a brief, pitying whisper before turning back to their champagne. He was already a ghost, a cautionary anecdote to be briefly savoured. As the path curved toward the front of the estate, he saw the main dock, illuminated by wrought-iron lamps. A sleek, private water taxi, its mahogany deck gleaming, was just pulling away. He instinctively ducked behind a thick cypress tree, his heart pounding with a new, sharper shame. He saw a flash of canary yellow fabric. It was Sienna. She was not alone. She was laughing, a bright, tinkling sound that carried across the water. Her arm was linked through that of the German industrialist, a man whose name Arthur couldn't even remember. The man was older, with a quiet, confident posture that made Arthur's own brashness seem childish in retrospect. He was listening to Sienna, nodding, his expression one of amused indulgence. It was the same look Arthur had worn just yesterday. He was watching his own part being recast in real time. Sienna leaned her head on the man's shoulder, looked up at him with wide, adoring eyes, and then they were gone, the boat accelerating into the darkness, leaving a shimmering wake on the black water. She hadn't even glanced back. Arthur felt a wave of nausea. He leaned against the rough bark of the tree, the reality of his situation pressing down on him. He hadn't just been a provider, he had been a stepping stone, a temporary convenience. His grand romantic narrative had been nothing but a business transaction, and his contract had just been voided. He finally stumbled out of the darkness onto the ferry dock. It was nothing like the polished private marina of the villa. It was a crude wooden platform, weathered and splintered, with a single, buzzing fluorescent light that attracted a cloud of moths. A few other people were waiting, a young couple with backpacks, an elderly woman with a shopping bag, a local fisherman smoking a cigarette. They glanced at him, at his ridiculously expensive suit and his mountain of luggage, with open curiosity. He was a freak show, the man who had fallen from the sky. He sat on his largest suitcase, the monogram AV seeming to mock him. High above, on the hill, the Villa Kestrel glittered like a private constellation. He could see the lights on in the imperial suite. His suite, where housekeepers were already erasing any trace of his existence. Then, his eyes were drawn to a different set of windows, in a wing of the villa he hadn't even known was there. A large corner office, its lights blazing. A silhouette moved to the window. It was Amelia. She was not looking down at him. She was looking out at the vast, dark expanse of the lake. Her lake. She held a phone to her ear, nodding occasionally. Mr. Bianchi stood respectfully a few feet away, holding a folder. Her lawyer, David, was there too, pointing to something on a large blueprint spread across a table. They were working. They were building. This wasn't the end of a story for her. It was just another Tuesday night. She was an empress in her war room, and he had been a jester playing in her courtyard, completely oblivious to the scale of her power. The quaint little family office was a global enterprise, and he had been nothing more than a minor, misbehaving asset. His arrogance, his dismissal of her, his affair, they weren't grand betrayals that had broken her heart. They were simply liabilities on a balance sheet, and she, the consummate manager, had finally liquidated them. The ferry's horn blared, a loud, ugly sound that startled him. The boat, a large, functional, and entirely unglamorous vessel, churned toward the dock. He stood up, his legs stiff, and began the laborious process of hauling his luggage aboard, bumping into the other passengers, muttering apologies that felt foreign on his tongue. He found a hard plastic bench on the open-air deck and collapsed onto it. The engines rumbled to life, and the ferry pulled away from the shore. He watched as the lights of the Villa Kestrel grew smaller and smaller, until they were just another sparkle on the horizon. The cold wind whipped across the water, chilling him through his thin suit jacket. He put his head in his hands, the crumpled, useless bill still clutched in his fist. He hadn't just been checked out. He had been rendered obsolete. He had been erased. And as the boat chugged across the dark, indifferent water, Arthur Vance, for the first time in his life, began to weep. The ferry thudded against the pilings of the Como town dock, a jarring, unceremonious arrival that vibrated through the cheap plastic bench and up into Arthur's bones. The other passengers, the backpackers and the locals, surged to their feet, eager to get home. Arthur remained seated, a statue of frozen disbelief, until a crewman yelled, "Signore, finito!" The end. He stood, his body aching, and was faced with the immediate, logistical nightmare of his life: the luggage. He wrestled the bags onto the dock, one by one, a sweaty, grunting spectacle. His hands, accustomed to signing 9-figure deals, were now raw and blistered from the unaccustomed manual labor. The other passengers flowed around him, a river of normal life parting around a rock of opulent misery. No one offered to help. They just stared at the man in the $5,000 suit, now streaked with grime from the ferry deck, who looked like a refugee from a world they only saw in magazines. He was on the brightly lit promenade. It was late, past 11, but the Lungo Largo was still alive with people strolling, eating gelato, their laughter echoing across the water. It felt like a personal attack. He lined his suitcases up on the pavement like soldiers in a lost cause. He needed a taxi. He needed a hotel. He needed to think. A taxi pulled up. Arthur raised his hand, a gesture he had performed 1,000 times. The driver got out, looked at the mountain of luggage, looked at Arthur, and sighed. "Dove? Where?" "Hotel." Arthur's mind went blank, then latched onto the only other name he knew, a name from his old life. "Hotel Via d'Este, in Cernobbio." The driver's eyes widened, then narrowed. Via d'Este. He whistled, a low, appraising sound. This was a fare worth having. He began, with surprising efficiency, to load the bags into the minivan's trunk, a puzzle of leather and brass. Arthur climbed into the back seat, sinking into the worn upholstery. The car smelled of stale tobacco and pine-scented air freshener. The drive was silent. Arthur stared out the window as they left the town centre and wound along the lake's edge. He saw the grand, gated entrances to other villas, worlds of light and power he had, just hours ago, belonged to. He was in a daze, a state of profound shock that insulated him from the full, crushing weight of his reality. He was operating on the muscle memory of wealth. He would get a room, call Stephen in the morning, and this nightmare would be sorted out. Amelia had made her point. It was a vicious, brilliant power play, but it couldn't be final. It simply couldn't. They pulled up the long, majestic driveway of the Villa d'Este, a hotel that rivaled the Kestrel in its grandeur and history. The doorman, draped in a magnificent uniform, hurried over and opened Arthur's door, greeting him with a polished, "Buonasera, signore." Welcome. Arthur stepped out, his confidence momentarily, reflexively, returning. This was his world. He could fix this. He strode into the lobby, a breathtaking expanse of marble, chandeliers, and priceless antiques. He walked directly to the front desk, leaving the driver and the doorman to handle the bags. "A suite, please," he said to the clerk, a woman whose smile was a masterpiece of professional hospitality. "Lakeview, whatever you have." "Of course, sir. May I have a credit card and your passport?" Arthur pulled out his wallet. He handed her the Amex Centurion. The black card, his primary weapon and symbol, looked solid and real. He was Arthur Vance. This would work. The clerk swiped it. Her smile faltered, just for a second. She swiped it again. "I'm sorry, signore. There seems to be an issue." "That's impossible," Arthur said, his voice a little too loud. "Run it again." "I have, sir," she said, her voice dropping, her eyes flicking to the doorman. "It is declined." "Declined?" The word was alien. "Fine." He was annoyed, not panicked. Not yet. He pulled out his J.P. Morgan Reserve card. "Try this one." She swiped it. The result was the same. Her smile was gone, replaced by a mask of polite suspicion. "This one as well, sir." "This is ridiculous," Arthur said, his voice echoing in the cavernous lobby. A couple dining on the terrace turned to look. "Your system is broken. Call the bank." "Sir, it is nearly midnight," the clerk said, her patience clearly gone. "Both cards are declined." Arthur's blood ran cold. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a creeping, icy terror. It was real. Amelia had done it. She had cut every line. He fumbled in his wallet. Cash. He had cash. He'd taken out 1,000 euros at the airport for walking around money. He'd given some to Sienna. He pulled out what was left, around 700 euros. "Here," he said, shoving the bills onto the counter. "This is for the deposit. I'll sort the cards in the morning." The clerk looked at the small pile of cash with undisguised contempt. "Signore, our rooms start at 3,000 euros per night. This is not sufficient for a deposit, or even for one night. But I just need a room. I'm afraid we have no availability for you, sir," she said, the final polite words of execution. A discreet signal, and a security manager, not a doorman, was suddenly at Arthur's elbow. "Sir, if you would please come with me." He was escorted back outside. The doorman, his face now a mask of disdain, was pulling his last suitcase from the taxi. The driver stood by, his arms crossed, his expression furious. "My fare," the driver snapped. "To Cannobio, and the weight, 120 euros. Arthur stared at him. 120 euros, for a drive that ended in his own eviction. He looked at the 700 euros in his hand. He gave the man the money, his hand trembling. The driver counted it, handed back a few coins, got in his cab, and sped off, leaving Arthur alone on the curb, a pariah at the gates of paradise. He was stranded. It was past midnight. His luggage, his beautiful, useless luggage, was piled around his feet like a barricade. He couldn't stay here. He looked at the pile. 3 large suitcases, a garment bag, his briefcase. He couldn't carry it all. He made a decision. It was the first decision of his new life. He unzipped the largest suitcase, his hands tearing at the contents. He pulled out a pair of jeans, a simple polo shirt, his dop kit, and his laptop. He stuffed them into his briefcase and his one small carry-on roller bag. He zipped them up. Then he stood and looked at the rest. The Brioni suits, the handmade shoes, the silk ties. Thousands and thousands of dollars of his old life, sitting on a curb in Italy. He turned his back on it. He left it all there. He began to walk, pulling the single roller bag, its wheels rattling on the cobblestones. He walked away from the lake, away from the lights, away from the world he knew. He walked for what felt like hours, his feet screaming in their thin leather shoes. He headed toward the one place he knew would be open, the train station. The area around the Stazione was a different world. The grand villas gave way to drab 1960s apartment blocks. The scent of jasmine was replaced by the smell of diesel and stale beer. He found what he was looking for. A small 2-star albergo with a flickering neon sign that simply said, "Hotel." He pushed open the glass door. The lobby was a small, linoleum-tiled room where a sleepy man in a t-shirt sat behind a plywood desk, watching a tiny television. The man looked up, his eyes taking in Arthur's filthy, expensive suit and his single, high-end roller bag. It was a combination that screamed trouble. "Avete una camera?" Arthur asked, his voice a dry croak. "Do you have a room?" The man grunted. 80 euro. 80 euros. In anticipo. In advance. Arthur pulled out his remaining cash. He had just over 500 euros left. He peeled off the notes and handed them over. The man took them, counted them, and pushed a physical key across the desk. It was attached to a large red plastic fob with the room number 3B written on it in faded marker. "Terzo piano," the man said, gesturing to a tiny, coffin-like elevator. The elevator shuddered its way to the 3rd floor, the smell of stale cigarettes thick in the air. He found room 3B. The key barely worked in the lock, but after a struggle, the door swung open. The room was a cell. It was dominated by a lumpy double bed covered in a thin, brown and orange bedspread. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling. The bathroom was a tiny plastic cubicle with a flickering fluorescent light that buzzed like an angry insect. The single window looked out not onto the lake, but onto a narrow, dark alley, where he could hear the clatter of bins and a distant argument in Italian. Arthur walked in. He let the roller bag drop. He didn't turn on the main light, leaving the room in the dim glow from the alley. He sat on the edge of the lumpy bed. The springs squeaked in protest. He was alone. He was in a cheap hotel near a train station. He had €500 to his name. He caught his reflection in the cheap, warped mirror hanging on the wall. He saw a stranger, a disheveled, hollow-eyed man, his face pale with sweat and fear. The arrogant king of Lake Como was gone. In his place was this terrified creature. His Patek Philippe still glowed on his wrist. He pulled out his phone. He tried to call Stephen, his lawyer, straight to voicemail. The number you have dialed is not in service. Not voicemail. Disconnected. He tried Robert, his COO. This number is no longer active. He tried his private banker. Disconnected. Amelia hadn't just frozen his assets. She hadn't just called his loans. She had systematically dismantled his entire support structure. The lawyers, the bankers, the executives, they were loyal to the money, and the money was hers. He was excommunicated. He stared at the Patek on his wrist. It was worth, what? $300,000? It was the only thing of value he had left. It was his last life raft. He unclasped it, the rose gold suddenly feeling impossibly heavy, almost obscene, in the squalor of the room. He placed it on the chipped laminate nightstand. The quiet, elegant tick, tick. Tick of its movement was the only sound in the room, a relentless, indifferent clock counting down the seconds of a life that had already expired. Thank you for joining us for this story. It's a powerful reminder that arrogancy often blinds us to the true power sitting right across the table. Arthur saw his wife as a relic of his past, never realizing she was the architect of his entire present. He thought he owned the world, but he didn't even own himself. His flaunting was not a sign of his success, but the trigger for his spectacular downfall, proving that quiet intelligence and hidden strength will always outlast the loudest boasts. What did you think of Amelia's revenge? Was it perfectly executed, or a calculated move she'd been planning for years? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want more tales of dramatic justice and incredible twists, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a good story, and most importantly, click subscribe and turn on all notifications. We have new stories dropping every week, and you won't want to miss what happens next.